Thai boxing. Thai boxing. Come see the Thais, watch how they fight with just everything. Their hands and feet and bows and knees. This is an art of boxing you would all love to learn. Ooh-ah.
Hi guys, welcome to the Eight Limbs Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Wagner, and before I get into the Muay Thai action today, I feel the need to address the elephant in the room. So if you follow me and my Fight Site colleagues on Twitter, you may have noticed a certain storyline playing out over the past week. I'm not going to go into too many details, but I will say that the rumors of my broken dick have been greatly exaggerated. I saw a doctor on Friday. I got a relatively clean bill of health. It seems that all the swelling and trauma should clear up pretty soon with a little bit of a rest. So I ask that you all keep me in your thoughts and prayers. I'm certainly doing better than John Dodson after yesterday. But anyways, we have a lot to cover this week. The most important of which was a card on the last weekend where Nuenglanlek Jitwangnon fought Chujaroen and Muangthai fought Ferrari Chujaroen. Nuenglanlek is ranked number 1 at Raja's 140 division and Lumpini's 135-pound division. These rankings are at MuayThai2000.com, which I'm not sure are completely accurate, but they're the only Muay Thai rankings I have, so I'm going to go off those. This was always a pretty rough fight for Chujaroen stylistically. He's a pressure clincher who likes to back guys up and clinch them on the ropes, but he's not super potent offensively in the open. Nuenglanlek is a really big puncher. He has strong punches, elbows, and knees, and he's a pretty good outfighter too. He can pivot off, move laterally, and diffuse pressure. So this was kind of, to give an MMA comparison, it was kind of like a Dos Anjos versus Alvarez style matchup, where the pressure fighter has to walk through a lot of fire in order to get his man in favorable positions, and he's not as prone to do damage in the open. So Chujaroen had a pretty rough ask here. Nuenglanlek hurt him in the second round with a hand trap to right hand. He hooked his lead hand with his own lead hand and then sent it right over the top. Nuenglanlek overall did a really good job of destabilizing Chujaroen when he got him into the clinch. He'd wait until Chujaroen threw a knee and then take advantage of his base and dump him. He would also stall out the clinch effectively. When Chujaroen was trying to enter the clinch in like an over-under position or trying to get like a collar tie around the head, Nuenglanlek would go to kind of a side lock, which is like a headlock, but his opposite arm would be wedging the forearm into Chujaroen's collar. So it's trapping his head, breaking his posture, and making it so he can't really do anything. Jodvic, back when he was competing regularly in stadium fights, he used that side lock really effectively to do damage, but it's also a good stalling position. So Nuenglanlek would just use it to kind of force Chujaroen into like being static so he couldn't open up with offense and force the ref to break up the clinch. Later on in the fight, Nuenglanlek had a lot of success using reactive clinch entries to kind of preempt Chujaroen's own clinch and get in better position. So he'd kind of back up near the ropes, and then Chujaroen would step into punch. Nuenglanlek would catch an underhook as he punched and then turn him into the ropes so he could break and put his back to the center of the ring and defuse the pressure. That's something Talenchai had a lot of success with in his fight with Chujaroen recently too. Chujaroen was working with active rear leg round kicks, and he was having success backing Nuenglanlek up with them, but he didn't really make much headway with them in terms of scoring. Nuenglanlek would usually block or counter them. Chujaroen started opening up more with his boxing later in the fight. He was using a decent jab to get Nuenglanlek's guard up before going to hooks and uppercuts in combination. He landed a couple nice elbows too, especially in the last round. He came in hot in round 5, but wasn't really able to get much done. Nuenglanlek was disrupting him on the outside and tying him up in the clinch, as well as hitting him with a few nice counter right hands and elbows to dissuade his aggression. So yeah, it was a pretty comfortable fight for Nuenglanlek. Chujaroen did about as well as I could have expected. Like I said, it was always a really rough matchup for him. Nuenglanlek's been on a really good run lately. In 2019, his only loss was to Kulabdam, who's an elite fighter who he also beat twice. So he had 2 wins over Kulabdam in 2019, 2 wins over Yodlekpet, and he beat Muangthai twice also. So he's in a really good position right now. He's scheduled to fight Chai next month on March 31st, March 21st rather. That'll be an interesting one. Chai has beat him twice already. They haven't fought since late 2018, but the same thing that makes Nuenglanlek such a rough matchup for guys like Wang Tai or Kulabdam or Yodlekpet makes him not a great matchup for Chai. His game is kind of designed to put guys through the meat grinder when they try to walk him down. He has these super powerful elbows and knees. He's not like a clearly defined clincher. He prefers being on not so much on the inside chest to chest, but just a little bit closer than the pocket so he can tear you up with these elbows and knees. And when you're trying to walk him down and pressure him, you have to go through all of that in order to get him on the ropes and get him in positions you need to be effective. But Chai, he's an outfighter, a southpaw with a really slick jab and body kick game. So what he'd do is just extend the distance, avoid Nuenglanlek's most powerful weapons, and made it really hard for him. So Nuenglanlek is pretty good on the outside, but he's not like a super slick kickboxer or anything. So again, that should be a pretty difficult fight for him, as it was the last 2 times he fought Chai. It'll be interesting to see where Chai's at. He recently got knocked out by a Chinese fighter in Wulin Fang, Jia Ioti, and he's coming off a pretty short layoff with that too. That was only his loss to Jia Ioti was on January 11th, so he only has 2 months to recover from that before he fights Nuenglanlek. Should be an interesting fight. The co-main event on this card was Muay Thai versus Ferrari. Muay Thai has been a mainstay at the elite levels of Muay Thai for a number of years now. He's currently ranked number 4 at Lumpini's 140-pound division. He's been having a bit of a tough time over the past couple years in elite Muay Thai. He's 25 right now, so he's starting to age out. He's getting up there in age. He's been batting about 500 over the past 2 years. In 2019, he dropped two fights to Nuenglanlek, who knocked him out with an elbow both times, and he got out-clinched by Yod Panamrung. So he's kind of trying to return to form right now. He beat the guy he was fighting here, Ferrari, a couple months ago in late 2019 by decision, but Ferrari took the rematch here. Muay Thai is a really heavy pressure fighter who likes to swarm his opponents. He'll walk forward in a square stance, throwing up his legs to dissuade kickers, and he uses the marching footwork and the teeps to enter the clinch or to set up his elbows. And the thing that he's known for is the devastating elbows. His most consistent way of landing elbows, what he'll extend his hands to signal that they're hand fighting, and he's trying to bait his opponent to hand trap him. So he'll post his hands out, and he wants his opponent to hook around his glove and pull it down to land a strike, and he's ready to immediately send an uppercut elbow down the middle as soon as they do that. He's finished a lot of guys like that, and he's landed a lot of devastating elbow strikes off that trap. He recently knocked out Panpayak Jitmoing last year with that same move. So Ferrari did a really good job of defusing Muay Thai's pressure. He used a lot of lateral movement that was good, and he was conscious of the elbows and made clear steps to stop Muay Thai from getting to the positions he likes to elbow from. Whenever there was a hand fighting exchange, he would control inside the biceps. He wouldn't hook around and give Muay Thai that reaction that he likes to bait, but he would stick to inside position whenever possible, control on the biceps. So he had when you have your arms on the biceps, if they try to elbow, you can deflect you're on the inside, so you're already kind of naturally barring the path to your chin. But if they retract their hand to throw an elbow, you can use your control to kind of steer them with your forearms and prevent them from getting that off. He tied up his Muay Thai's arms with overhooks in the clinch, and when Muay Thai had inside position and was in a spot where he could elbow from, Ferrari would kind of weave his forearm into Muay Thai's. It's hard to explain without a video, but he would kind of lever his forearm in Muay Thai's elbow, so he didn't have room to move his arm up to elbow. So he was always blocking that elbow whenever they were in the clinch. He even slipped outside a few elbows. That was cool. Muay Thai would charge forward with those uppercut elbows, and Ferrari would like slip to the side and then duck behind him in the clinch. Muangthai's pressures with a really square stance, so he's always squared up, switching stances, moving forward, and using that marching footwork to walk guys down. And his square stance ironically leaves him open for elbows himself, because when you're walking forward in a square stance like that, you're presenting a much bigger target, and especially with Muay Thai, he's so aggressive and he's always pushing forward. It leaves him open for those counter elbows. And Ferrari busted Muay Thai open with an intercepting elbow in the second round here. Ferrari landed some nice clinch sweeps as well. When Muay Thai did get in the clinch, he didn't get a lot done. Like I said, Ferrari was very conscious of the elbows and always trying to block those off. And Muay Thai had to work with kind of knees that he didn't really have the space to throw, so they were kind of ineffective. And Ferrari was manipulating his balance well. He would sweep when Muay Thai tried to knee, so it was a really good performance from Ferrari. I'm not sure what's next for Muay Thai, but it might be a good idea for him to take another one fight or go off and fight a little bit lower competition for a while. That was the only big card that happened recently. It was a pretty light couple weeks for Muay Thai, but there's a few interesting main events to cover. Seoek Suchebuntham fought Teptaksin Sorsonsing on Wednesday, February 12th. Seoek is ranked number 2 at Rajadamnern's 118-pound division. I'm not familiar with Teptaksin. This fight was for the Rajadamnern Super Bantamweight Championship at 122 pounds. I could only find a 4-minute highlight of this, so I don't have too much to say about it. Rajadamnern fights are pretty notoriously hard to find. Lumpini usually streams their events on Facebook, but Raja fights, usually the most I can find is very short highlights. But from what I saw, Teptaksin was storming forward with relatively sloppy flurries, and they would fall into the clinch a lot. Seoek was catching a body lock consistently and muscling him into the ropes, or turning him from collar ties while landing strikes. Seoek landed a lot of good at intercepting elbows when Teptaksin pressured as well, so not too much to say about that fight. I didn't get to watch too much of it, but Seoek looked good from what I saw. The day before that, on Tuesday, Prajanchai PK Sainchai fought Salmon Garment. This was for the Lumpini Super Bantamweight title at 122 pounds. Prajanchai fought out of a really square stance, which allowed him to defend Pet Salmon's kicks pretty easily. Pet Salmon was in a more bladed stance, and he had a lot of difficulty kicking with Prajanchai, since Prajanchai would get to his floating block easy after kicking, while Pet Salmon had more trouble defending the kicks. So Prajanchai's square stance, when your feet are not bladed, like you're riding a skateboard, but you're standing almost square on with both your hips facing the opponent, it makes it a lot easier to defend kicks because you can rapidly transfer weight between your feet and easily pick up either leg. When you're in a bladed stance, the weight distribution makes it more difficult to quickly pick up your rear leg and check the kicks. And Prajanchai could easily check out both sides as well. So Pitch Salmon, a lot of the fight was taking place at kicking range, and when Prajanchai would kick, he would be able to easily get to a floating block, which is where when you throw a kick and it lands, and then without touching that kicking foot onto the ground, you bring it back into a check. So Prajanchai would land a body kick or a kick in the forearms, and then he'd have his leg immediately in the air in a check, ready to block Pitch Salmon's counter kick. Prajanchai was using the long guard really well to diffuse Pitch Salmon's punching offense. Prajanchai showed off a nice southpaw lead leg body kick. He was throwing it as an intercepting counter as Pitch Salmon moved forward either to close distance or to throw his right hand. And he was also setting it up with a jab, flicking out his jab and using it to hide the switch on the lead leg body kick. I thought Pitch Salmon would have had a lot more success if he would try to combine his punches and kicks. He was mostly sticking to either punching combinations or kicks on the outside and wasn't really putting them together. So Prajanchai only really had to be focused on one. He'd bring his hands down to catch or block the kicks, which could have been exploited by adding punches to them. If you watch Sangmani and Tawanchai, in their first fight, Tawanchai he kind of dunked on Sangmani at range. Whenever Sangmani kicked, he would catch it and counter, and then he'd block his punches with a long guard and either counter with a knee or kick or just pivot out. So in the rematch, what Sangmani did, he punched off his kicks a lot more. So whenever Tawanchai dropped his hands to catch the kick, Sangmani would be there punching him in the head. And the more he did that, the more it made Tawanchai hesitate to catch or block the kicks, and he had a lot more success with his punching offense on the lead, which then allowed him to kick off those as well. So the more you can kind of make your opponent hesitate to catch your kicks because he's wary of your punches, it has like a synergistic effect. It makes your boxing offense and your kicking offense more effective. And Pet Salmon feinted a kick into a punch once early and it worked really well, but he never went back to it. He cocked his hip like he was about to throw a round kick, and then stepped in with a right hand to the face, but he didn't try to do it more often. Pride and Shy was actually the one playing his punches off his kicks better. Whenever Pet Salmon caught his leg, he would kind of hammer him with right hands to get him to drop the leg. So I thought that was something that Pet Salmon could have had a lot of success with there, since Pride and Shy was really focused on catching the kicks and moving his hands to defend them. But Pride and Shy looked really good, won pretty comfortably. He's the new Lumpini 122-pound champion. The day before that, on Monday, Yothin FA Group fought Pechsuntri Jitwangnon. Yothin is currently ranked number 3 in Lumpini's 118-pound division. I'm not familiar with Pechsuntri. Yothin is well known for his clinch prowess. He likes to walk guys down, similar to Muay Thai, where he'll do the marching footwork. He'll often hop in behind a tie hop, so he'll like pick his lead leg up and just hop in. So if his opponents are trying to teep him or kick him off, then they'll run into the barrier and he'll be able to wrap their head and go to work with elbows and knees. Yothin was doing that here. He was walking Pechsuntri down in a square stance, marching forward, lifting up his legs or hopping in behind the tie hop to dissuade his kicks. Pechsuntri was playing a pretty decent outfighting game. He landed some really nice body hooks as Yothin stepped in. He was using lateral movement pretty well, but he couldn't really stop the flow of Yothin's pressure and clinch. Yothin would look to get inside into the clinch and then get his forehead right into Pechsuntri's chin and work from that lock with knees. So he'd have one hand wrapped around the back of his head, the other collar tie, with his forehead pressing right on the chin. It makes a super tight lock that puts a lot of pressure on their head and posture and makes it really hard for them to like swim in or do anything. It gives you a lot of control of their balance. And Yothin did a really good job of manipulating Pechsuntri's balance in the clinch. When you're in that kind of lock, one of the easiest ways to escape is to turn to like pivot out to create space and slip a forearm through. When they have their arms around your head, you rotate your body or pivot out with your feet, and it creates a little gap between your neck and their shoulder where you can swim your arm through. But Yothin would follow his movement to keep him in the lock and work with knees. There's a lot of really neat clinch work from Yothin in this fight. At one point, Pechsuntri had double underhooks, and Yothin dug his head in, put his forehead in the chin, and used that head position to turn the double underhooks into a long clinch for him. So Pechsuntri's underhooks were nullified there, giving Yothin the dominant position. And he ended up where he was using his forehead in Pechsuntri's face to manipulate his posture and balance, while his arms were outstretched beyond Pechsuntri's head, pressing the forearms and elbows together in what's called a long clinch. It's really good for dragging guys backwards, and you can apply it in the open. You can really squeeze your forearms and elbows together to secure that position, lower your base, bend your knees, and drag them back into knees. Yothin used it here to turn him onto the ropes and then landed a few good knees off that. At some point, Yothin got busted open by an elbow, but none of the highlights for the fight I could find showed that for some reason. It was a Raja fight again, so we didn't have too much of the fight available. On Friday, February 7th, Pech Morakot fought Pong Siri in some kind of one championship event with what I'm sure was a colorful title that I can't remember. This was for some one belt. I don't really know or care too much about one Muay Thai belts, and you probably shouldn't either, but that means it's a relatively important fight. Pong Siri took this fight on like a day's notice. He'd fought, I believe, about a month earlier. I actually covered his last fight on my first Patreon Muay Thai podcast, and he was filling in on a day's notice, so he didn't really have much here. He didn't look in shape. He didn't look very prepared. He was mostly a punching bag. Pech Morakot was a lot taller and rangier and was able to keep Pong Siri on the outside pretty easily. He was using his southpaw jab really effectively. I love how Pech Morakot used his jab here. He was constantly flashing it in Pong Siri's face in order to set up entries into his knees and clinches and to keep him on the outside. So whenever Pong Siri tried to pressure him, he'd be there flashing that jab in his face a couple times, just distracting him, not really slamming it in, just occupying his vision and then moving off. I'm not really sure what Pong Siri was looking to do in this fight, although again, that goes back to the short notice, taking in on a day's notice. I couldn't really expect much from him. But he followed Petch whenever he backed up, but didn't really seem to have any consistent process to work inside. He wasn't like working a defined pressure game. He was kind of trying to block and counter the kicks, but couldn't get to him because of the reach disadvantage. And he was usually conceding hand control, walking forward behind a high guard and not really trying to control the lead hand. So Petch Morakot was able to work with that southpaw jab pretty much at will. Petch Morakot just destroyed him on the inside and in the clinch. He used his long guard to enter in the clinch and work with knees. He was constantly framing off Pong Siri to push him back into the ropes, bar punches, and manipulate his balance. It was really a masterclass in using like the long guard and the extended hands to destabilize an opponent's balance and to keep them from getting off their offense. And Petch Morakot used it brilliantly to set up his clinch and knees. And he wouldn't just use the long guard and frames to enter the clinch and then back out. He would frame on the exit of the clinch too. He'd go in, work with knees or elbows, and then frame off as he exits and push Pong Siri back, which allowed Petch Morakot to keep Pong Siri off balance and continue the exchange while ensuring that he was still out of position to attack. It was a really nice performance from Petch Morakot, and at the very least a brave performance from Pong Siri, who was filling in a day's notice. It's absolutely wild. Finally, on Thursday, February 6th, Dieselek Petchendi fought Yodkunpon Sitmonchai. These guys fought like a month ago. I believe that was for a title, but this one was a non-title fight. Dieselek is the Lumpini 154-pound champ, but this fight was a non-title fight at 157 pounds. In their last fight, Dieselek won by decision, and Dieselek basically gave a repeat performance here. He boxed him up, worked with some nice punching combinations behind his jab. He combined his punches and kicks really well, putting a lead leg switch kick in front of and behind his punches. So he'd start the combination off with the lead leg switch kick and then go to his 1-2, or he'd slam in a few punches and then land the switch kick. He showed off really good head movement. So for anyone that, if you're in the Conor McGregor camp of thinking knock Moys are all stuck in the mud and they can't box, they don't use footwork or head movement or whatever, this is a good fight to watch. And this isn't even like elite Muay Thai. They're fighting at like 157, so this is above the weight where most of the elite fighters are. Dieselek is still quite good, but he's not like a pound for pound talent or anything. So this is a good but not elite guy showing off pretty good boxing and like moving his head a lot. So it's a good one to watch if you need that myth busted. At one point, Dieselek did a cool thing. Yodkunpon had a shin barrier, like a knee shield. So he either went to kick and then left it there, or did it from the clinch, but he had his shin across Dieselek's hip. You see that a lot. Fighters will use it to block knees so their opponents can't throw knees, or to create distance after kicking. And Dieselek like elbow spiked the thigh to get Yodkunpon to drop his leg and then punched him in the face. So that was really neat. Yodkunpon had some decent kick counters, but Dieselek was usually able to block them so they didn't get through too cleanly. A lot of them still scored because they landed on the forearms, but Dieselek was the one landing the more clean kicks. In the fifth round, Dieselek really put on a boxing showcase. He came out working behind a much more active jab than he was before, and did a lot more combination punching. He landed lead hooks and right uppercuts in combination a lot. So it was a cool performance from Dieselek. And if you're going to watch these fights, I would recommend skipping the first two rounds. Out of all the ones that have full fights, I'd recommend skipping the first two rounds in everything but Nuenglanlek versus Chujaroen and Muangthai versus Ferrari, because usually rounds 3 to 5 are the ones that have most of the action. And that's about it for the past couple weeks. I lied earlier when I said there's a lot to talk about this week. There was a UFC card on the weekend, but there wasn't a lot of interesting striking talent there. It was capped off by a main event in which a large light heavyweight man got knocked out throwing a naked leg kick with no setup against another large light heavyweight man, which is about par for the course for that division. So I think I'll end this one a bit early. Hopefully the next couple weeks brings us a little bit more to talk about. As always, thanks for listening, and if you enjoy the content that the Fight Site brings you, have a look at our Patreon, where you can pay for rewards such as a particular podcast topic you might want to hear, or a particular long-form article you might want written. The higher tiers, we even advertise a personal scouting service. So if you're a fighter looking for an edge on his opponents, you can pay us to watch tape and come up with a strategy to beat them. So I'll see you guys in a couple weeks.
Just everything, their hands and feet, and balls and knees. This is an art of boxing you would all love to learn. Ooh-ah. Small, no need to fear. Strike right and left with your own bows and with your knees. Now suck them hard with your soul and then kick out and on.